People, we're back in Portsmouth, and this week we've got Steve Rolls of Portsmouth Mediation Service.
In June 2015, I walked through the doors of Portsmouth Mediation Service, and one of the first things I hear from one of the team is that mediation is becoming an outdated word. The future is restorative. Retributive Justice asks three simple questions. What law has been broken? Who is to blame? And what is the punishment? He said restorative asks different questions. Who has been hurt? What are their needs? Who else has been affected? Who is responsible? What needs to happen to make this situation better? If we can build strong, cohesive teams and communities with strong, positive relationships, that's a great place to work. And studies have proven that poor relationships, no relationships, toxic relationships are worse for your health than obesity, drugs, drinking, lack of exercise.
In the example of the woman who unfortunately got raped, for other people, would that not be too much to forgive?
Well,
Steve.
Alec.
How are you, mate? Welcome.
Yeah, no, I'm good. Thank you, mate. Good to be here.
Well, cool. Now, welcome to the What's Going On show. The show where we shine the light on people doing things in communities, and you with Portsmouth Mediation Service are doing something in the Portsmouth community, and today we're going to find out what that is. So, cool. A little tradition I've got on the show is, instead of me giving you an introduction, I'd like to just give it straight over to you. So, who in a nutshell is Steve Rolls?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? And a question, I think, Alec, that's important for everyone. Not who is Steve Rolls, but that question of who am I and what on earth am I doing? I often challenge people with those two questions. So, in terms of, and we're talking about identity here. So, in terms of who I am, of course, I'm like brother, father, uncle, friend, manager, and more recently I'm pops to like an increasing tribe of grandchildren. But what underpins all of those roles for me is my Christian faith. So for me, my identity is rooted in being, I would describe as a child of the living God, and that underpins who I am and everything I do.
Interesting. Didn't know you were religious. Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Okay, cool. So we'll get to that then. So for you, where did you grow up?
Grew up in Bridgemerry in Gosport.
Okay.
Tough place.
How's that? How was that growing up? It's a Navy city, is that correct?
Well, very much so. And my dad had like this vegetable and grocery lorry. And in those days, in the 60s, 50s, 60s, after the war, these housing estates sprung up, like you say, often full of Navy families. And my dad would drive around these estates, flogging his wares, as it were. And so early memories are riding on the back of his lorry, hanging out as he pulled into each road, going, rolls, rolls. And, and then people would literally do their week's shopping on his lorry. Yeah.
Interesting. So cool. So what did you ever have a name then? So you said you was obviously part of the church. I mean, I'm guessing you did that from when you were a kid. Is that correct or no? So we'll get to there. So okay, so when you went to the school, what did you plan to do in life, and did you end up doing it?
I think when I remember back, I wanted to be a journalist. I don't think I was too bright enough to get the qualifications, if you like. But no, I didn't have any firm ideas. My mum would always say to me, whatever you do, don't take over your father's round, sort of thing. So the last thing she wanted me to do was to be taking over this fruit and vegetable business and driving lorries around Gosport, if you like. She saw how long and hard my dad worked, and so she encouraged me to get a proper job. So no real ambitions at school, not a clear vision of what I wanted to do. I stayed on at the sixth form in Bridgemerry, finished there with some A-levels and then started work in 77 as a A-level trainee for Waitrose in Gosport.
Interesting.
It's the trouble when you talk to old people, they go back a long time, don't they?
No, that's totally fine. So, worked for Waitrose. How many years to do that?
I mean, interesting, my mum said, avoid the fruit and veg if you like, but I think it must have been in my bones. So I joined Waitrose. I don't know whether you ever shop at Waitrose. I can't afford to anymore. We're like oldie little people now. But so I joined Waitrose in Gosport as an A-level trainee. That should have put me on a road to branch management. But I was a young 18, let's put it that way. At that time, I was running a mobile disco with my friend Steve Lehman. We run a road show called Black Velvet Soul Jazz Funk Show, and so we were having huge fun playing that sort of stuff underground, as it were. We were promoting our own events as well, and this thing that sort of consumed me started to take over my day job. In actual fact, they'd find me asleep on top of the potatoes at 7 o'clock in the morning because I'd got to bed so late. And always remember the manager, Mr. Cooper, used to say to me pretty much every day, "Mr. Rolls, do you want to be an A-level trainee with Waitrose, or do you want to be a full-time disc jockey?" And just one day, I said to him, "Do you know what? I want to be a disc jockey." Honestly, so we started to do that full time. We had a following around the country. We were putting on events that people were coming to from across the UK. We hired a cross-channel ferry for a funk cruise to France, and as time went on, we were making hundreds and losing thousands. And as so that ended in tears. And my friend at Waitrose, Southsea, got me a job back at the shop. 2 years later, and in a lot of debt.
Yes, you ended up back at Waitrose. That must have been good on the road, though. I mean, so funk. Can you dance? Do you dance?
I do dad dancing still, but I think we did dad dancing in those days, But yeah, this soul jazz funk thing was. We'd avoid anything in the pop charts, if you like. And I remember we were doing all-dayers and all-nighters. I remember one gig we did an all-dayer in Portsmouth. And then when that finished, we got on a coach and went to Purley and had an all-nighter, if you like. So, yeah, just different days. And the music was something that united the people at the time. Yeah, and my mate Steve, he's still doing it. He was the real music man. I suppose I had some sort of skill for promoting events, if you like. A bit more enterprising, but he was the music man, as it were.
Interesting. Cool. You've gone back to Waitrose then. So, where did that take you?
I spent the 80s in Waitrose in Southsea.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was, and this is it. I'll just pick this out because it is quite interesting and quite relevant to what I do now. But in the early 80s, the meat managers in Waitrose were always butchers, and there was this thought or this idea: do butchers make great managers? And what about if we had a manager in charge of the meat department and all the butchers who wasn't a butcher? So I became one of the early experiments of what was known as a non-technical meat manager. So I had no idea about meat. I mean, I was colourblind. I couldn't even see green meat, if you like. The blood made me want to sort of reach as such. But I donned the white trilby and the white coat and the meat manager badge, if you like, and had a team of butchers to oversee, if you like. Now, in that environment, you very quickly learn to serve people who know what they're talking about, because I couldn't do the job without them. They could certainly do it without me. And so I think it was just unwittingly one of those first experiences where I started to get hold of the idea of serving people to be great at what they do, if that makes sense.
Interesting. Serving people to be great at what they do. So you did the whole 80s through, throughout the whole 80s you was at Waitrose. When did you leave?
I got to the end of the 80s and I thought, Waitrose, John Lewis Partnership, great company to work for. Great pension scheme. You get to 50, they give you 6 months off and sabbatical and stuff. I got to 1990, I was 30, and I thought, do you know what? Unless I leave, I'll be here for the rest of my life. And so I remember sitting in the office one Thursday night, and a friend of mine in the office manager, Eileen, she was reading through the evening news job adverts, and I sort of she said, my husband would give you a job. I said, oh, what does he do? She said, he works in financial services. I said, oh, that sounds interesting. So in 1990, I went for a job interview with a guy called Ian Douglas, who's now a close friend of mine. And financial services, it was a life assurance salesman's job. And I had the job, but quite simply. The interview, that was interesting. I interviewed him really, but it was like, can you breathe? Yes, I can. You've got the job. So the 90s, I started in this new industry, as it were, trying to, I don't want to say flog life assurance, but trying to, sell life assurance and pensions and investments. In those days, it wasn't quite as regulated as it is now, although it was beginning to be. But the commission was great, and a commission-only job, that moves you outside of your comfort zone.
No, I can imagine. Just tracking back a bit then, so funk, soul, jazz, how it was, right? How was Portsmouth in those days? How was Portsmouth in those days? Because obviously now it's a lot different, is it?
Well, in terms of the music, we did a lot of events in Portsmouth. Some of the people listening will remember in Arundel Street, the Locarno and the Bally High upstairs. We were doing the Solent Sunday Soul Club on the Bally High, and we were putting on quite major events at the time. Steel Pulse, High Tension, the Players Association. People old as me will remember some of these bands, if you like. And so Portsmouth, and then in the latter years, we started to work on a Saturday night at Martha's, above Martha's, which was a great little event. We'd be in the pub till like 11:30 and then travel over at 12 o'clock to sort of start the gig, if you like, and finish about 4 o'clock. And a little dance floor upstairs, all your friends were there. We were paid good money, little curry afterwards, for breakfast. So I'm still living in Gosport, don't forget, but Portsmouth was a place where there were lots of soul kids. Yeah.
Interesting. No, nice. Fair enough. All right, cool. So back to financial services then. So you've gone into life assurance. But how did you find yourself to here then, to Portsmouth Mediation? So did you do your career in there, or?
Well, in 91, 92, I'm trying to sell life assurance. It's a hard game. Yeah. It's a hard game. Commission only. There were some very, very dark days, and my first marriage ended during those days, if you like. But what happened? This was just the right time, right place. But what happened? I alluded to the fact that the financial services industry was starting to be regulated, and suddenly the industry didn't need flash salespeople on the back of a fag packet type thing. I'm not being any disrespectful to those pioneers of the 80s, but they wanted business to be done properly, and suddenly they needed good managers with good administration skills rather than come on boys, let's get out there type thing. So I found myself being promoted very quickly to branch manager, not on my sales skills but on my ability to be able to run a tight ship, I suppose. And those skills I'd obviously picked up from Waitrose, and certain part of that ethos was that the customer is the most important person and we need to look after them, if you like. I've since changed my view on that. I can explain more in a minute, but again, this was interesting because I talk about being a non-technical meat manager, but suddenly I was a sales manager of a team of self-employed, commission-only salespeople. Now listen, you don't manage self-employed, commission-only salespeople. They manage you, like herding cats. They manage you. So again, I started to learn that, build on those skills of serving people to be great. I realised that I needed to make the environment and their lives as easy and as pleasant as possible, and give them every resource so that they could be great. And the greater they were, the more money I earned, if you like. So again, just unwittingly, it was another sort of step to a place where I think, on reflection, I'd start to call this restorative leadership. First time I mentioned that word, won't be the last. So to sort of fast forward, I spent the 90s or the mid-90s working for a company called Colonial in sales management, and then when they closed, my friend Ian Douglas, who gave me that first opportunity, we set up in business in Portsmouth. We set our own financial services business up, and instead of it being hidden away in a business park, we decided to put the office on the pavement on the high street. So we had a shop in Palmerston Road, Douglas and Rolls Financial Services, a one-stop shop, if you like. We had a team of financial salespeople, advisors, and for 3 or 4 years that was really good. And I'm fast forwarding again. That came to an end when our host company that we were tied to, the insurance company Colonial, decided to wrap things up. So we went with another company called Positive Solutions, and I worked with Positive Solutions as a business consultant, so advising other financial advisors about the opportunity of joining Positive Solutions and the benefits of this new technology that they had embraced. Interesting, because in 2020 our business went paperless, and that was quite ahead of the game. Yeah.
Very interesting. Tracking back a bit then, so 2 things. You said life insurance is a hard game. How? Why?
Well, I believe in life insurance. It's really important. I believe in pensions. It's really important that people provide for themselves. It's not a question that a family decides on their own. No one wakes up on a Saturday morning and says, come on love, get the kids ready, we're going down to the high street to buy a nice little bit of term assurance. 50 quid a month sitting in a bottom drawer or something, piece of paper. It's a difficult thing. People don't buy it, so you need to sell it. And it's a difficult thing to sell. Not least of all because if I started to talk to you now about the benefits of you investing in your pension, your eyes might just glaze over, and so to be able to go from somebody who hasn't even thought about ensuring their life and protecting their family to doing some business where they sign on the dotted line is a lot of work.
No, fair enough. And the other thing was, you said you used to believe that the customer's always right until later on.
Yes, so in business there's something called the customer is king, if you like. I've changed my mind on that. The most important people for any organisation are their staff, their teams. So for me, the most important people in Portsmouth Mediation Service is our team of professionals and volunteers and friends and supporters. Because without them, the customer hasn't got a chance. So if we serve them well and help them to be great, they can provide a good service at the sharp end.
Fair enough. Okay, then cool. So you did the shop in Palmerston Road for 3-4 years. 2020, that brought us up to there? Or?
No, not quite. So yeah, I'll try and whiz first because I was so old. You see, yeah, it's great when you interview university students and ask them for a potted history because it doesn't take very long. But no, so very quickly then worked as a business consultant for Positive Solutions. 2012, that had run its course. And I went to work for a charity called Faith and Football. My friend Mick Mellows gave me an opportunity to run and to head up some of the enterprise programs that they were enterprise and leadership programs they were running for young school children, and also Faith and Football. We also helped. I did for 7 or 8 years. We run a football team, Heartlands United, that started off with some rather unruly kids from Buckland, if you like, and evolved into something very special, where the people, before our very eyes, turned from boys to men, if you like. So that was a really rewarding time. Some funny times, and some hard times. But so I journeyed with Faith and Football quite closely. That was some fantastic opportunities. We run this social enterprise and business program for Year 9 students. So in the schools around Portsmouth, Year 9 students would form a business. A team of 6 or 7 students would form a business, would form a board of directors with a CEO and a finance director and so forth, sales and marketing director. They would devise a product or a service and bring it to market over a 3-month trading period. Brilliant. We used to hire the Cascades shopping centre in March on Mother's Day. It was often the day before Mother's Day. Easter was often coming up as well, and all these businesses would turn up and set their stalls up with their branding and that in front of Next and Marks and Spencers and so forth. So the real buzz on the trading days. But it was huge. Some they were developing websites and some. I remember a team from Cam's Hill in Fareham started to export their products to America. So it was just, for Year 9 students, it was brilliant. And Faith and Football were working with some partners in India, and what we were doing with all the profits these companies were generating was investing them in some of the orphanages and poorest people on the earth, really. And what we did, the winner of the competition, we used to have this final at Fratton Park, where all of the businesses, all these guys, the place was full, and there would be some secondary prizes, but the first prize was a trip to India to see firsthand where the money had been invested, the trip of a lifetime. So I took about 7 or 8 different groups to India over the years, which was just brilliant.
I bet. So okay then, when did faith come up in your life then? So you said it wasn't at the beginning of your life. So when did you find faith?
Yeah, so we're talking 1997. I have what I would describe as a spiritual awakening, a revelation, if you like. I wasn't looking for anything fluffy or life was good. I wasn't looking for anything spiritual in a sense, but in the 23rd of December 1997, I have a moment, if you like, and in Christian circles they would term that as being born again.
Okay, fair. Do you want to go into that moment? You don't have to.
No, if you're interested, and cut me off if you get bored. Such. It didn't start on the 23rd of December. It sort of, or that was the start of the beginning, if you like, and the end of the start. Because a year or so earlier, on my second wife now, we have a baby called Stanley. I'd been christened as a young boy. It was like traditional, and I said to my wife Christine at the time, "Let's get the boy done." And she was like, I'm not religious, I'm not up for any of that. And I said, well, I'd like to do it. She said, well, you can go and do it, I'll do the sandwiches, and so I thought, okay, right, I need to find out where I can get him christened, so and I wanted a proper church, like one with a spire and a graveyard outside, and I didn't want any wacky warehouse or anything, so I lived in Porchester at the time, and I remember going down to the castle and looking on the notice board, and there was the name of the secretary. Phoned her, and she invited me to an evening to learn more about your children being christened. So I turned up with other parents, just me, there were the other couples there, and the vicar gave his spiel, and he started to talk about infant baptism and stuff, and that was a bit weird, but I remember at the end there was something about the vicar, just something about this vicar that, I don't know, just was attractive in a sense. Just there was something about him. I said to him afterwards, as he was saying goodbye to everyone, I said to him something like, because he said during the course of the evening that he'd been to Oxford. He's plainly a switched on guy. I said to him at the end, I said, what makes a bright bloke like you, dress up in all this frock stuff, and believe in something you can't possibly know is true? And he said, oh, it sounds like you're searching. I was like, no, mate. And he said, how about you come along to one of our Alpha courses? I thought, that's the last thing I'm going to do. The following week we had the christening. That all went well, all candles and stuff. Stanley got christened. We had a party afterwards, which is what I really wanted. That was a shameful affair in terms of the amount of alcohol consumed and so forth. I think my ex-mother-in-law still can't forgive me. And the next day, being very hungover, I drove to Rye in Kent. Is it Kent? To the end of Sussex, to see one of our financial advisors. This is 1996. And on the way back, this was a Monday, on the way back, I found myself thinking about this Alpha course that he'd mentioned. It was on that Monday evening, the day after the christening. And I found myself trying to get back for it. It started at 6 o'clock, I had a long drive back. And I went straight there. And it was awful. There's all these people grinning at me and stuff, and but an interesting, and this was the start really. I had no idea. I sat, we had some pizza and lettuce or something, and I really didn't want to be there. My head still hurt. And then we watched this video, a Nicky Gumbel Alpha video, and I was riveted. And then afterwards, you could just talk about whatever you want to talk about in a little circle and that, So I found myself going back the next week and then the next week, and it was great because they just let you go off on one. I was like, how do you, and how do you, few people in here know that that's possibly true, and and everybody outside is wrong, and all these objections, And I suppose at the end of about 6 or 7 weeks, I'd run out of steam, and I started to quite like the people as well. I was grinning back, and we get to the end of this Alpha course, and it was a very enlightening course. I realised how much I didn't know, and it was great to be able to ask questions. And at the end of this, the vicar said to me, he said, well, what did you think? I said, it was great. I said, I really enjoyed it. I said, I like the people. I said, but how do you know it's true? He said, I'll show you. I was like, show me. He said, I said, but prove it to me. He said, yes. I was like, this is challenging. So I said, okay. I remember being on the pub on the Friday night, saying to my mates, I met this vicar who's going to show me there's a God. Right. So I made an appointment to go round to see him at the vicarage. Do you want to hear any more?
Yeah.
So I finished work, I was all suited and booted, turned up at the vicarage, and didn't know what to expect really. And took me into his study. There's like a little couch thing. I sat down on the couch, and he starts to talk to me. He said, I always get a little bit nervous at times like this. I said, well, in case nothing happens, ha ha. And as soon as I said that, I knew he wasn't frightened of that. I knew he wasn't worried about something not happening. He said, no. He said, often people hear God's calling but they don't respond to it. I was like, okay. So he started to tell me what they were going to do this evening. He said, in a minute, I'm going to get my wife to come in and we're going to pray for you. He said, we're going to lay hands on you. He said, I just want to say now, a number of things could happen. He said, you could become very, very hot. He said, very, very hot. He said, you might start to shake. He said, and he said, you also might start talking in foreign languages. This is an Anglican vicar. I wanted a proper church, you know. So I thought, as he's going on, I thought, this guy's expecting something to happen. You know, he's not joking here, you know. And I started to like, you know, he said, my wife's going to come in a minute. He said, we'd like you to kneel on the floor. He said, you okay to do that? I said, yeah. He said, and we'd like you in your own words to say really, I think the words he used was say that you're a sinner, say that you've done things wrong, confess that you've done things wrong in your life. He said, would you be happy to do that? And well, I thought for 2 seconds, I knew where I'd been. You know, I've been around the block a few times, you know. I was like, yeah, I can do that. You know? So I knelt on the floor. His wife Anna, he'd come in, and Michael Thomas was the name of the vicar, and they both lay their hands on me and start to pray. Now I didn't get hot, I didn't pass out, I didn't shake, and I didn't speak in any foreign languages. But what did happen was I had the worst thoughts racing through my head. I mean, I can't say it was like a pleasant experience. There was no bright lights, just these awful thoughts racing through my head. I was thinking, flipping heck. I'd been around the block, but I'd never thought of such things in a sense. It was really weird. And I thought, what is up with you? These nice people are praying for you. And all, you know. So after they finished praying, I sat back up on the little couch, and he said, that's it really. He said, we'll leave you. He said, and you can let yourself out when you feel okay, you know. So I sat there for sort of 5 minutes and then left, you know. But during that session, I'd made a confession of faith. I'd accepted that the Lord Jesus was real and that He was my Saviour God. And as soon as I stepped out the door, well, the next day, things just started to change in my life. They just started to change. I mean, I remember going. I'm not offended by people's language. My native language. You know, if you left out the swear words, I never used to say much, you know, as such. But I remember a couple of weeks later, being at the pub on a Friday night with McGuinness, with fag still, and you know, and I could hear everyone swearing, and I just started to laugh to myself because I thought, wee, that's weird. You've stopped swearing. You know, I remember a number of months later, my mate Paul, we were playing golf. He said, because my mates were like, did not take well to some of this. He said, Rosie, he said, now we know you're a Christian. He said, no one could play as bad as you without swearing, you know. But just parts of my life started to get sorted out. Yeah, I won't go into all the gory details, but it started to get cleaned up. And then this desire to read the Bible. And I'd stayed in hotels all over the world where you pick it out the bedside cabinet. You know, in the beginning, you know, it's like, no, that's not good enough. You know, it was all about wars and donkeys, it seemed, you know. But suddenly, I could read it and I could understand it, and they were words of life. So that was 1997, and that journey of faith has just got stronger and stronger and deeper and deeper.
And that found, yeah, because that was my burning question. Like, how did you get into faith and football? Okay, so cool. You do that for many years. You're working for charity. When did you find PMS?
Finally. So, and this is faith. So faith for me has to work. All right, faith can't be a fluffy feeling at a Sunday gig. It has to be something that works 24/7 as such. And you know, one of the first things I heard in the church from someone was that it's theologically impossible to go to church because we are a church. So I wanted to live my faith out in the marketplace. I wanted it to be real, and I wanted to work with God on what he was doing, on his plans and on his purposes. So it's funny because Mick had some funding that he was paying me for. That funding stopped in May 2015. I must admit, you know, faith is always a risky business. I remember thinking, what's going to happen now, as such. And then suddenly from nowhere, I say nowhere, I used to meet regularly with a friend who was in business, financial services, and he was a trustee of Portsmouth Mediation Service. We met once a week, and a couple of other people. We still do. And on this morning in May, end of May, he starts to pour his heart out to me. He said that Portsmouth Mediation Service is in a right pickle. The previous manager's gone, and the place is all over the show. He said, and I'm stressed because all the day-to-day running of the service of the organisation is coming to my door, and it's doing my head in. You know, my business is suffering and that. And as he's pouring his heart out to me, and I'm sure this was the prompting of God, but I say to him, maybe I can help you out here, because at this point, working with Faith and Football, I'm self-employed as a business consultant. So some of my services I was selling to Faith and Football, and I said to him, maybe I can help you out here. Maybe I can step into this vacuum, this void, and provide some leadership. You know, maybe we can steady that ship and buy you some time to get a proper manager in. I said I'll do it for 3 months. I'll do it for 2/3 less than what you're paying the other manager, and if at any point you think this is not working, we'll call that quits. And on that basis, he pretty much bit my hand off. So in June 2015, I walked through the doors of Portsmouth Mediation Service. I can't spell mediation. I have no idea what's going on in this service. And one of the first things I hear from one of the team is that mediation is becoming an outdated word. The future is restorative. I didn't understand 2 syllables of that, but I sort of believed it.
Okay, so what is restorative then?
Well, I had no idea at that point. I had no idea what mediation was or restorative, but the future was restorative, and that's a great question. So I sat in the back of Portsmouth Mediation Services offices in this little darkened office, and I was thinking restorative. And then I remembered my friend John Swindell, who was always banging on about restorative justice and RJ this and restorative this and that. And I thought, I'll speak to John. So I phoned John up. And I go and have a cup of coffee with him. I'm like, John, what's all this restorative thing? And the way that John describes restorative justice to me is that it's the opposite to retributive justice. And retributive justice is what operates in our criminal justice system. In actual fact, it operates in pretty much every sphere of our lives. He said retributive justice asks 3 simple questions. What law has been broken? Who is to blame? And what is the punishment? He said restorative asks different questions. The first one is who has been hurt? What are their needs? Who else has been affected? Who is responsible? What needs to happen to make this situation better? And I started in that moment to pick up the idea of restorative justice, and began a journey that we're still on.
Okay, so that was back in 2015. So 10 years you've been going with PMS. Wow,
it's flown.
So how has the landscape changed from then to now, and have you covered any ground?
Paul, I don't know. I'll see your interviews later, won't I? So, during that time, we rewrote our mission statement, our vision statement, we rewrote our vision statement to see Portsmouth become established as a restorative city. Now, that was so way out there 10 years ago. That was such a ridiculous sentence to write, too huge, too big. But seriously, and there'll be some people that are watching this will be saying, do you know what, it's not so mad now. There are so many positive signs in Portsmouth of Portsmouth genuinely becoming a restorative city, that lots of organisations and teams and spheres of life are adopting a restorative culture, if you like. So it is really getting there. An awesome journey, and like you say, it's gone very quick, and there's always going to be some work to do.
No, I agree. So, who then do you target? Because, say, 10 years ago, it was something you couldn't really look at, and it was unachievable in a way. So, who then do you target as your consumer, of your audience that you're trying to influence to make change?
Okay, so Portsmouth Mediation Service deals with mediation as such, and I always say to people that when you need mediation, it's already gone too far. As such. So we were always an organisation that you contacted when things had exploded, or when when you had bad news. Alec, I often talk about this pyramid of escalation. All right, and so when something breaks out or kicks off at the base of that pyramid, without any intervention, it's going to get worse and worse and worse and start rising up this pyramid. There are neighbourhood feuds in Portsmouth that are 25, 30 years old, and no one has any idea how they ever started as such. I talk to business leaders regularly who have no idea what division and fractures in their teams on the shop floor do to their profit and bottom line. Because when you've got a team that's empowered, that's motivated, that's envisioned, that's all working together, there's nothing impossible for that team. It's worth its weight in gold. But the moment you get some sort of division or fracture, then two sides emerge. And they become entrenched, they stop communicating, and it starts to get worse and worse and worse. Often in business, in the workplace, and people will relate to this, a team leader or manager will try to make the situation better and invariably make it worse. And this thing starts to rise up the pyramid of escalation. Eventually it hits human resources, who have got no idea what to do with it whatsoever. So they'll enact the company disciplinary or grievance process. And if anybody has gone through that, they don't pop out very well on the other side. And then eventually you hit the toxic top of that pyramid. This is where everyone in the world wants a very quick fix to it. Whether it's knife crime, drugs, whatever, when it gets to that toxic top, you've got funders chucking money at it, and all I keep encouraging people to do is to invest at the base of that pyramid. So instead of, let's try and cut off the toxic top. If we can build strong cohesive teams and communities with strong positive relationships, with a personal restorative toolkit that enables them to avoid conflict, avoid conflict from breaking out and escalating if it does, then that's a great place to work. And so increasingly, that's where our mission is. And some people will be bored at me saying this, that have heard this before, but I liken Portsmouth Mediation Service to the fire brigade. Yeah, you can still phone 999 if it's blazing and we've got the team with the skills to come and dampen all that down. But increasingly, we're in the business of handing out the equivalent of a restorative fire blanket, smoke detector.
Interesting. So just on businesses in general, how would you say that the pyramid has been affected, or the triangle has been affected since COVID and the introduction of hybrid working?
Well, the conflict is a natural part of human life. We're just not very good in dealing with it. We're not. I was talking to somebody at the surgery yesterday, a social prescriber. In the workplace, what will happen is that somebody eventually, with conflict in the workplace, because business doesn't notice when those fractures first break out, it begins to notice when it's paying someone 50 grand a year to sit at home being anxious and depressed as such. So what normally happens is that at some point the fight or flight kicks in, and one or more of the parties will run off and straight to the doctor, and they get signed off. What we're trying to encourage GPs, I think, is to maybe signpost them to our service, because they're not anxious or depressed at this point. But if you sign them off and they sit at home nursing and rehearsing that problem in the workplace, they soon will be. So what we're saying to all organisations, businesses, schools, the universities, some great work doing there, charities and other voluntary organisations, is let's see if we can build a new positive restorative culture. And I think that the key to implementing and embedding a restorative culture is understanding that all of us are not wired up for it. Our default is like, I often say when you have a bit of road rage, the best thing about road rage is after you've exchanged all your signals, you drive off and never see that person again. But when conflict breaks out in the workplace or with your neighbour, and you're going home or to work with that every day of your life, it's a very stressful thing, and it has a huge impact on our well-being. We live in a world now where, particularly our health, our mental well-being, is suffering, and a lot of that is through conflict. The studies have proven that poor relationships, no relationships, toxic relationships are worse for your health than obesity, drugs, drinking, lack of exercise. So there's a huge opportunity for Portsmouth and everybody that lives and works in it to become part of this journey, if you like. And I believe lots and lots of people, I meet people everywhere that have picked up on the restorative idea that together we're stronger, and that are champions in their own workplaces and own families. And I just think that cumulatively and incrementally, gradually, Portsmouth is becoming a nicer place to live.
Okay, so it's the big debate then. So retributive justice versus restorative justice. Now, looking at traditional punishments, for those people who would solely believe in that, let's say someone does commit something or does do something that is beyond restorative justice in many ways. What are your views on that?
Well, I'm shaking my head a little bit because there are no-go areas for restorative justice. No-go areas. So even when you get to the very top point of that toxic top, there is still a restorative opportunity. We hosted a conference and back at Fratton Park in 2019, and our guest speakers that day, friends of ours, were Ray and Vi Donovan, whose son Chris was murdered by a gang of youths that were fueled up on drink and drugs. And to cut a long story short, and there's a very emotional story, because they were left after the criminal justice system had run its course with lots of questions, not least of all, why our son? Such. And I know that Ray talks about this moment in the courtroom where the youngsters are being sent down to prison, and Ray catches the eye of one of the fathers of the boys, and at that point they embrace, because there's a sense they both lost their sons that day. And again, to speed this story up, Ray and Vi end up visiting those boys in prison, and when they come out, they start to work with them around schools, talking about the dangers of drink and drug. Now, nothing's going to bring their son back, but there's still a restorative opportunity, if you like. We've seen there was a Guildhall presentation, a testimony from a lady at the Guildhall a number of years ago, who had been raped, and after a number of years had met her attacker. A horrendous story, but at the end she finds some sort of closure, and peace in that restorative meeting. Now, this is all stuff at the toxic top. What we're trying to, what's the mediation service is operating with is what we call restorative practice. So trying to take that restorative justice and use it at the base of that pyramid to create, more healthy and thriving relationships and communities.
No, that makes sense. And especially, well, not especially, but in the example of the woman who unfortunately got raped, for other people who might go through similar things, would that not be too much to forgive?
Well, interesting, and of course, there's no restorative is to go to embark on restorative justice, and for a victim to meet their harmer has to be voluntary, and there has to be a lot of preparation with professionals, such. And not all restorative meetings need to end with forgiveness, but this other lady I have in mind, she met her attacker. Because the judge said at her trial, he said to the accused, to the attacker, he said, "You ruined this lady's life." And she thought afterwards she wasn't having that label on her as such, So the restorative process empowered her, I suppose, and she said to him, "I had no idea I was going to say this to you when this meeting was set up." She said, "But I forgive you." So when and this can happen with any victim and perpetrator at any level. Somebody who's been mugged, somebody who suffered a racial hate crime or whatever, and when you get two people in the same room, we find this with our neighbour disputes and conflict. Suddenly it's another human being you're sitting in the room with. It's not the idiot down the corridor, it's another human being. And what's very interesting, I love this, and not that I'm a brain surgeon or anything, but there's something, my friend John always talks about this, there's this thing called mirror neural networks as such. So in a room, we often, the restorative questions are, how was you feeling when this happened? What were you thinking about? And as people start to talk about their feelings, like, I was really scared when I heard this noise like last night in my house. I had my granddaughter around and she was frightened. As people start to talk about their feelings, the other person who's listening, their side of the brain that deals with feelings fires up. And that's how you get empathy. And when you get empathy in the room, everything's possible.
Powerful.
It is.
Okay, so that's where Portsmouth Mediation Service sit, and that's what they stand for. So you've kind of given the vision of what you would like out of Portsmouth, but what is the 5-year plan? What is the 10-year plan?
You sound like you do.
What's that?
We work with people that like strategies, like a 5-year plan. And listen, I've got nothing against a 5-year plan. I've got nothing against a plan, and I don't want to cause any trouble with this. But we make a lot of it up as we go along.
Why is that? I always ask that as well. It's a burning question I ask, is do you plan? And that's interesting.
Well, and not that we don't plan. The Portsmouth Mediation Service embarked on a 3 and 5 year strategic review last year. We delayed our AGM to October to announce that strategic review. And I like it because there's a direction of travel there as such. But I've already explained that I'm a man of faith. And so I'm looking for open doors every day. I'm also looking for closed doors because I'm not looking for any good ideas anymore. And this is what faith at work looks like for me, is I'm looking for the God idea all the time. I'm looking for those connections that are part of his plans and purposes. I don't want to sound weird on this, but this is what faith looks like. A bit risky sometimes, and also I think you do look a bit weird when when you're following the divine, as it were. So a lot of what we do is to, I always describe PMS as like a speedboat. Some of these organisations, businesses, like oil tankers, when they want to change or do something new, it takes them ages to turn it around. But we're very agile, and we can move quickly when opportunity arises, if you like. And I like that. Rather than this is the plan, let's get on it and try and hold on to it. No, why don't we try and look for opportunity, and uncover those opportunities, uncover the right people to be in relationship with, and to look, and also the wisdom and discernment to avoid those doors that really are closed. We don't want to be forcing them open. It's a lot of charities, organisations can get this mission creep, where suddenly you've forgotten what your core of your vision and mission is, and you're starting to do stuff off it, if you like. So I'm not against planning, but there's a sense with all that we're doing so much across so many different spheres, that we're being pulled along rather than pushing it.
Interesting take. Very interesting take. Well, cool. That kind of brings us to a nice close on this part. But yeah, thank you for sharing. And okay, I'm excited to see what Portsmouth Mediation Service come up with next. No, that'll be interesting. But no, thank you, Steve, for sharing. And I look forward to part 2.
Thank you, Alec.
All right, amazing. Steve, welcome to part 2. This part is where we go out into the street, and this time went out to the street Portsmouth, and we asked the question. So feel free to stop it at any time and speak what you want to say, or we can watch it through and we can react at the end. Whatever you decide, whatever you prefer. So let's crack on. Question so this week is, how would you resolve a dispute?
How would I dissolve? 5 minutes each. Argument your point, and then if there's a crowd, ask them to give them questions, and everyone try and come up with a conclusion. Violence.
How would you resolve a dispute?
How would I dissolve it? Depends what kind of dispute it is, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. Give me an example.
I don't know, like say two people are arguing, could result in violence. How are you going to resolve that?
I have been known to split things up or not get involved, but you don't tend to want to do that too much these days, for obvious reasons. So I don't normally walk by anyway, let's put it that way. But yeah.
Interesting. How would you two resolve a dispute?
I don't know really. I'm not sure. I don't
know. Let's say two people are arguing, could result in violence. How would you step in, or how would you resolve it? Would you go to anyone? What would you do?
Probably separate them, take them apart, get their both stories.
Would you call the police?
Depends how violent it was.
What extent would you call the police or get someone else involved?
Someone's getting hurt? Yeah.
You resolve a dispute.
How would I resolve a dispute?
Yeah.
Just sort it out, isn't it?
Yeah, how would you resolve a dispute between two people?
I speak between two people, right? It depends. With both of them, maybe one is antisocial and the other one is social as well. So it depends with how the personalities of the two people, like how they communicate and cooperate with each other. Yeah.
Okay. At what point would you get an authority or someone else involved to resolve it?
I'm not sure about that.
How would you resolve a dispute?
If it's something to do with me, I would
Yeah.
just walk away.
Ignore.
Not involving me.
Yeah.
Watch from the sides.
Hear it. Would you ever go to like the police or anyone else to sort it out, or would you just be like,
Depends how serious.
Yeah.
If it's like fist fight or like actually like someone's gonna get hurt,
Then
yeah.
you would. But if it's just a
If
bit
it's
of just
just-
an argument
yeah,
and
a
nothing's
bit
really
of
happening,
shouting.
then you just stay out of it.
how would you resolve a dispute?
What do we do in our house when we have a dispute? When we have an argument? We don't. Do you know what we do? We just go and call it off, don't we? And then
Get food.
How would you both resolve a dispute?
A dispute?
I don't know
I'll
what
just-
dispute is.
Like an argument. I'll just shout over her pretty much.
No, I don't know, I'm quite stubborn. So I like to take time to think
Yeah.
before saying anything.
How would you both resolve a dispute out in the open?
Between us.
Not just between you, but say two people are arguing, think it might get a bit violent. How are you gonna resolve it?
I wouldn't get involved. I'd just leave them to it. I don't want to get punched.
Hear it, hear it, hear it.
I don't know. I'd probably just try and diffuse it a little bit if I could, if I thought I could. But otherwise, yeah, I think it's probably best to maybe not get involved as well.
Okay, that was the question.
Interesting question.
What are your thoughts?
First of all, I think each one of those clips demonstrates the fact that all of us haven't got much of a clue what to do when things go pear-shaped. I think that's what I was saying earlier, that none of us are wired up to be naturally restorative. I think when you gave your example of someone arguing that could move into violence, you're starting to pitch it at the top of that pyramid of escalation as such, and some of those answers are naturally like don't get involved, and I think we'd say the same. So interesting with the family, what happens when it kicks off inside the family as such, and I felt like Mum was probably putting a positive spin on it as such, but yeah, what happens when those conflicts, disputes break out in the family, in the workplace? None of us really know how to deal with that ourselves and how to help others that are going through it. We said about in the workplace, didn't we, that often a team leader or supervisor will try and make it better and invariably make it worse as such. So this is picking up on we do a lot of restorative training, trying to help people with a personal restorative toolkit that can be a real help in those situations. And so I think first of all, there's two things. You know, how do we deal with disputes when we're in it? Because that's probably the hardest. It's easier to try and help somebody else that's got a problem. Well, what responsibility are each of us going to take when we have a problem with somebody, whether it's in the family, in the workplace, in the street? What we tend to do is pour petrol on the situation. A lot of this you know, you make me, you do this, you do that thing, which is just stoking it up really. I'm not surprised with the answers. I mean, interesting, isn't it, how people really stumbled over that question.
Yeah, I found it quite interesting. So, with the Portsmouth Mediation Service, you say disputes are kind of at the top end. So when should people get in touch with Portsmouth Mediation Service?
No, I'm saying that the violent disputes are at the top. So when you were saying an argument that could lead to violence, it's obviously accelerated up that pyramid. You know, there are some heated conversations, you know, and some of the disputes in the neighbourhood that our team regularly deal with, you know, are people that used to be friends and have just, you know, they've fallen out over dog poo, parking, you know, all those everyday things as such, you know, and they've probably done a bit of nursing rehearsing, you know, that sort of how dare they park their car there all the times, like, you know, fed their cat and all that sort of thing, and eventually that's going to come out. So often we get referrals made from housing officers, even police officers, when these things are, you know, a parking dispute is starting to get more serious as such, and you know, and is moving up that pyramid of escalation. The police have been called because there is starting now to be intimidation and tit for tat as such. And our default is, if someone, you know, on the roads, I was saying, if someone cuts me up, my default is to get them back as such, you know. So you know, to be a restorative driver takes a little bit of intention as such.
It does.
And we're all the same, you know. We are all the same. We are all wired up the same, you know. So you know, this is why restorative is not a hard sell. Everybody appreciates that. You know, restoring relationships, repairing harm is a good thing. We're just not very good at it.
Fair. So that's the end message. We've got to get better at being restorative, hey?
For sure.
Well, no, Steve, that brings us to a lovely close then. So, yeah, any final words on the video or anything you want to say? But that brings us to a lovely close.
No, it's been great, Alec, and great to be able to talk about the good things that are going on in Portsmouth. There's some fantastic organisations in Portsmouth, all of them, lots of them, the City Council, the university, schools, all catching this restorative idea that together we're stronger, and it's really exciting to see how those restorative champions and ambassadors are starting to join up for the sake of the peace and prosperity of Portsmouth.
Well, amazing, Steve. That brings us to a lovely close. And yeah, I look forward to seeing what happens next.
Thank you, Alec. Cheers.